So we'll be doing that. And then the other thing is this, and we'll talk about this a little bit. This is a way. We say this a lot. We do a lot of like premarital stuff. We say this is a way. This works for us. This is not the way. And we're 10 years in. We don't know it all. In fact, the bulk of what you're going to hear us talk about today is from mentors that we have both current and over the years. And so this is stuff that we've either applied and are glad that we did, or stuff that we did not apply and wish we would have. And so that's a lot of what we kind of worked through. And so we're going to try to be as vulnerable as possible. I'll say this will be fun too. I don't know if anybody will take me up on it, and we didn't talk about this, so okay. You're welcome. So we'll do this too. If you've got a quick follow-up in the middle of it, right? There's enough people in here where we could go, just shout it out. I'll just go just shout it out. We'll try to answer that in real time too. I'm so curious if anybody will do that. I would never do that, but I hope you do. It'd be great. But we're going to hit some of these today, and then we'll kind of walk through that. So first, we're going to tell you a little bit about our story, and then we'll get going. So why don't you start it off? This is Emily, the Emily Holden, by the way.
Cute.
There you
cute.
Go.
We're good on that. We're good on that.
You're welcome.
So we went to school at Lee University down in Tennessee, and we met in the library.
Yep.
We
met in the library because my mom told me if I could find a pretty girl in the library, that was a good place to do it. So I was there to pick up girls, not to learn. I didn't go to the library.
It was finals week, and he was reading a magazine, so if that tells you anything.
Yo, girl, holla. And then for all the Christian geeks, it was Relevant magazine. Do you guys remember Relevant magazine?
Oh, yeah, I knew.
Yeah.
It was a ministry
like
man.
Rob Bell's on the front. And he's got cool guy. Anyway, so.
We met there. And
who were you with?
I don't want to talk about that one.
Another guy. I feel like that's what we're looking at for another guy. That was great.
We're good. Doing a lot of studying.
Yeah. There it is. There's the first one.
Yes,
that's good.
Thank you, Jesus. So we dated for about 6 years. We were trying to do the math.
Yep.
I think that's right. We had a little breakup in between there. Yep. And then we've been married for over 10.
Yeah, so, 10 years, which has been great. And so we've been together a long time. Yeah, we met when we were, 19, 20?
Yeah, 19.
Yeah, Emily's older than me by 3 months, so cougar. Would you say, where's Harold? Did you say Kruger? Is that what you said? Harold was in there. I think you said Kruger. That was pretty great. So, so we did that, and we've been together a long time, and it was fun, too. Just like brief part of how when we got married. So we met in college, dated for a long time. We both ended up in Atlanta, and we were both leaving Atlanta right after we got married. So we got married, put all of I lived with somebody in Atlanta, so I was in the basement. So we get married to this family. We had young kids. We packed the basement full of all of our moving boxes, and for 2 weeks we lived there, and their kids would just come down, which is what you want 2 weeks into marriage, just kids showing up randomly. And
always on high alert.
Always on high alert. Yeah, that was... It was great. So we did that.
It was great.
And then, but we moved, and so we really kind of got this really cool opportunity to get married and move, and we did all the things in like a 3-week period that everybody says do one at a time. So we moved, we got married, we moved, and then we got brand new jobs, and which is really cool. And so that's kind of the spark note of us. And so what we want to do is, I would say, we're going to talk a little bit about your questions. The first thing that came out, and this is kind of a package of questions, is really around singleness. And so if you're here and you're single, we're going to talk to you, or if you're here and your kids are single and you want them to know stuff, this is around that too. And then from this, we'll go into the marriage stuff. But the question that came up more times than I thought it would come up, and I did not expect this one, so it's just fun to talk about. But the question was, how do you know when you're ready to get married? And so if you're here and you're single, this is my favorite question. So you don't know, so it's just great.
We won't answer it.
Yeah, but also I knew first. So I would say when we met each other, and it sounds kind of cheesy, we met each other in the library. I went back that night and told my roommate, Zach, I was like, I met my wife tonight. I think we're good. He's like, you're an idiot. But that's what I told him. And then 6 years later,
lock that down.
Landed that plane. Yeah, it was pretty great. Yeah, it was pretty great. And I would say for us, one of the things that we learned really early on in our relationship is that having one person who feels like they know early and going that long it requires a lot of patience and wisdom on both parties, because I knew early, and then I gave a great ultimatum. So you're like, hey, you broke up. What caused it? I gave an ultimatum. Yeah. I don't recommend that. That wasn't fun, especially on a 6-hour trip back from Ohio midway through. So we had 3.5 hours in the car from there. So that was a great time. That was fun. And so for us, we would say like I knew early, but we talked a lot about being patient and not forcing it, and that was one of the things we talked about. So yeah, how would you talk about this?
Yeah, so like I knew that I loved him and I wanted to be in a relationship with him, but marriage really did scare me, and so we broke up. We dated other people. I quickly realized I don't like other people, and so when you're dating someone, I think like in our experience, yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to do that a lot.
Gosh,
Yeah,
it's going to be insufferable.
Yeah.
And when you're dating other people, you kind of like get this vision for your future together. And whether it's like, I want this many kids and these are their names, like I wouldn't really recommend that maybe. But
so you had Henry and Eleanor, which is pretty fun.
I didn't say Henry Holden or Eleanor Holden. Thank you so much.
The Holden part was great. I like the Holden part. Yeah.
But I knew that kind of like I couldn't see that with anybody else, and that kind of vision that like we kind of built, even like the unsaid vision, was exciting to me. I don't know if it was FOMO or not, but I didn't want to miss out on that, and so that's kind of when I knew that there was just a piece in that.
Yeah, and
so
one of the things we tell single people a lot, and this is something that I don't think gets taught as much anymore, but when we were coming up, I remember going to middle school. And you got to church in middle school. Anybody go to church when you were in middle school? Anybody do this? One of the things that got taught a lot was don't have sex. But outside of that was, hey, when you get really clear about what you're looking for, it actually helps everything else. And so one of the things that we were both really lucky in is that when we were young, it was really ingrained in us to have a vision for our future. And it doesn't have to be like in pen. It doesn't have to know everything. But we had a general idea of where we were going. And I said this last week when we talked about singleness, is really you're both running in a different, maybe not even different, but you're running in a direction and you end up linking up and coming alongside of each other. But one of the most attractive things that for me with Emily is the first time we met, I met someone who had a clear future for where she was headed and clear values about what she was looking for. And so when you talk to people who are single, we actually talk to our kids even really young about some of this too, is going, you need to have a very clear vision for what you're doing and what God is calling you to do. And that doesn't mean that everything is like, I know exactly what I'm doing, but and this is for the guys, when a woman meets you, and you're like, I mean, it could be a lot of things. I always tell them, just run. Let him go figure it out on his own because he's not going to figure it out with you, right? Don't do that. You need to go have a vision for your life and what God is calling you to do and get that around what you're doing. And then Emily had that with values so early too. So when we came together, it felt natural. And we also had something that the people that were around us could speak into, whether it was good or not. So that was good. So one of the questions around this too, which was fun, is, I can't wait for you to answer this. Fun. What red flags do you look for in dating? So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So like we said, we dated other people. We took a little break, year and a half break.
Yep.
And we dated other people. And then I remember this guy lived out of town. He was visiting my parents and me, and he left to go back to his home. And I remember I was upstairs and I was crying, and my dad actually came up and he said to me, and what you see now could be the best version he will ever be. Ooh. And are you okay with that? Ooh. So quickly, the blinders really fell off, and I realized that there were a lot of people in my life kind of like steering me like, hey girl, that ain't it, that's not the one. I
was one of them. It was great. Yeah.
You actually kind of were.
Yeah.
In Proverbs 11:14, it says, where no counsel is, the people fall, but the multitude of counselors, there is safety. And this is such just a wonderful passage of scripture, because it is so important that you have, especially if you're single and if you're married, that you have people in your life that are Christ followers and that are led by the Holy Spirit and are speaking into your life. Not some pop psychology, not some Instagram post that was forwarded like dance in the rain and whatever crap people say. I don't know.
I was saying that yesterday. That was
good. Not something that's just good advice, but people who are really surrounding you in seasons where you need Spirit-led wisdom. And if you don't have that, there are people, I'm looking around and I see people who would love to help other people in different seasons really and surround them and speak life into them in that way.
Yep.
So we'd really encourage you guys to do that.
One of the cool things about our church, and we talk about this a lot, and there's a bunch of them here. If you're here and you've been married, I'm just kind of curious. If you're here and you've been married for more than 10 years, I'm just kind of curious. Can you raise your hand just for a second? I'd love to do that. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Look at all y'all. So here's what I say. I love this about our church is we actually have a wide spectrum of people that are, single, married, people from all different age groups. And one of the things that I'm so glad about, I know you just said this, one of the things I'm so glad about is that we had mentors that come alongside of us to tell us when we were being stupid, when we were being wise, when we were making good decisions, bad decisions, and to speak into that. And so I would say this to anybody who's single. I think you need to get very clear on the vision that you're headed towards. You need to get very clear on the values that you're looking for. And then what I would challenge you to do in the room, if you've been married for more than 10 years, so you just raise your hand, so I got you. Anyway, I'd love for you to do this. What happens for a lot of people, they go, well, our marriage isn't perfect, so I'm not gonna. Or, we don't have it all together yet, so I'm not, they don't want to hear from me. And that's just simply not true. And so this is one of the things that we hope for our church, that we pray about a lot, is this, that if you've been married for 10 or more years, like you've been in this for a while, we want you to step up and mentor other couples. And if you're here and you're kind of new to that, or you just got married, or you're kind of, new to the whole thing, what I would say to you is I want you to ask. And anytime you ask about mentoring, let me just say this, don't ask somebody to be your mentor. Nobody wants to do that because they're not sure how long the commitment's gonna be. No one says that. Just don't do that. But say, hey, can I take you to dinner? I'll pay, and I just want to ask you some questions. And if you pay, I promise they'll go, right? Take them to a nice dinner, and then they'll end up paying anyway for the most of the time anyway. So I just tell you this. So ask people, can we take you to dinner? We do this as a couple. We do this now. There are people in this room now that we take to dinner. We call up. We don't say, hey, can you mentor us as much, but we'd say, hey, can I get your perspective on this, or can I do this? I did this week. I won't embarrass the person because I didn't ask for permission. I asked somebody if they would ride in a car with me this week so that I could ask them questions about our city and pastoring and all this kind of stuff. And I said, I'll buy you coffee. So it was a really expensive date, but it was great. And I was going to buy him too, but we just bought one. So it was great. So I would say this.
We took our cleaner car.
We did take the cleaner car. So they got to ride in the minivan. So it was fun, not mine. But I would say you need to find mentors that are speaking into your life too. Now, why don't you talk a little bit about like the season of singleness?
Yeah, so that is a challenging time, right? When you're single and you don't really see how you're going to, like what God has for you next. When you want to check off all those boxes of like, I got my spouse, I'm starting a family, we're progressing in life. I think a lot of times, and maybe I'm just talking more to women in this, we stall in other areas because this checklist hasn't happened yet. And so I would say the easiest thing to do is to get distracted by what you don't have and miss out on what God and who God is calling you to be in that season. God is faithful in every single season. He's faithful when you are single, and he wants to push you into new things. He's faithful and good and will prepare you in seasons of waiting. And he's good and faithful when he puts you, in the season of marriage, and then in growing kids and all kinds of things. So just I know everybody probably says be patient in this season, but really I would say just pursue God, and don't stall out in areas that you feel like, because this hasn't happened, I can't move forward in this, because it's a beautiful season when you really go for it.
Yeah, and I think for us, I would say this is true if you're a follower of Jesus. If you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, I would say there's a different set of things we would tell you. If you're here and you're a follower of Jesus and you want to marry someone who's a follower of Jesus, again, the best thing that you can do is just get so clear on what it looks like to follow Jesus. And so I put in my notes, I said it this way, I was like, do you have a vision for your life? What is God calling you to do right now? And having a clear answer for that. In your first few conversations, if you should have an answer for that. Ladies in the room, I would say this, if you're on a date with somebody, you don't have to ask it that directly, but you're going to get a sense of, does God have a clear, do they know what the clear calling is? What's God doing in you now? Like, are you consistently being transformed and retransformed by what God's doing in you? And then the other one is this, are you actually surrendered to what he is doing in your life? This is a totally different thing about somebody who's wise and living well. You can meet somebody who is good and wise and doing good things and not surrender to the power of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And I'll just tell you, it is so much better to be with somebody, I think, like that. Now, we're going to get into the marriage question. These are kind of fun. This one I did not expect to come up to, so this was fun. This was actually the bulk of the questions that we got asked. I think this is kind of like just a little bit of our church, too. One of the questions is around independence. Do you want to read that question?
How do you maintain a good marriage without losing who you are as an individual? You know what I mean? Yeah, that's why we dated 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
So I would say, I think the biggest thing is that I noticed that Patrick was a student of me. And so all throughout dating and still, I would encourage you, like, to be a student of your spouse or your significant other. It's really important that your spouse understands who you are, what makes you come alive, and what's really important and makes you like the best version of yourself. There are times where like we are maybe a harder season or there's less joy, and it's really important that Patrick looks at me and says, "Hey, are you feeling like Emily right now? Like, what can we tap into, or what can we push you towards more that'll make you feel like that best version of yourself?" And that's how I don't lose myself in marriage, because I'm Emily. I'm the same Emily that I was before I got married, and the more I can tap into those kind of things, the more independent I guess I feel within marriage.
Yeah, and I think on the independence question, which is so many couples that we talk to, because most of you are doing pretty well in life. You know what I'm saying? Like we talk to so many people who are like individually doing well. You come together. A lot of people get married older too, and you're kind of moving your own direction, and you come together, right? One of the things that we've learned around this too, and I talk about this a lot. I talk about this to people who are followers of Jesus a lot, is you are dying to yourself when it comes to your relationship with Jesus. You are giving the fullness of who you are to him. But there's a passage around this in Ephesians chapter 5. I'm going to read it. We've read it last week, but again, I want to say this way specifically to the husbands. It says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church." And again, this is the part, "and gave himself up for her." So I would say this for the guys in the room, specifically the husbands. We definitely do believe that you are a leader everywhere that you step into, right? You should be a leader, especially in your home. But there's a piece of this where I would go, and part of that is your role as a husband is never fully and finally complete until one of the questions that you're asking is my spouse flourishing in the specific areas that they feel called to flourish at, right? So I married someone who's very driven and extraordinarily smart and has dreams and aspirations, all these kinds of things on her own. If I get to the end of my life, and I wrote this down early on, I said, I want her to feel, not just know, but I want her to feel that I was coming alongside of her passions and nurturing those things as well. And so I think one of the questions of how do I maintain my individuality, I think you can do that. But the best question that you could actually ask in marriage that's working on oneness is going, okay, how do I foster this person's dreams and passions and their unique skill sets too? And this is hard to do. I'll say it can feel competitive. Like how many of you in your marriage, you're both a little bit competitive? Anybody else like that? Where are my Enneagram 8s and 3s at? Come on, don't lie about it. Yeah. You know this. And there's a part of this, again, where you're dying to yourself going, mutual submission isn't just in decision making. Mutual submission is actually in going, I want to elevate the other person constantly. And you've been around people, and I think I can say this, you've been around people where that doesn't happen, and it feels like one partner is trying to drag the other person into whatever they're doing, or vice versa, or the way that they talk to each other feels that way. And I would just say one of the most attractive things that you can do, one of the best things that you can do for your marriage is to go, how do we get to the end of our lives and my spouse go, they were fostering the dreams that I have. So that's kind of one of the things that we'd say around that. Now, the one I'm most excited about to answer is going to be around fighting, because this is fun. How many of you ever had how many of you had like a big blow-up fight in one of your relationships with dating or marriage? Like a big one. Anybody? Come on, be honest about it. Like you were a different person. You know what I mean? Anybody else?
Thank you, Rhonda. Love you, girl.
Like you don't tell that story at church. Words were new.
What'd you say?
In-laws are fun, yeah. There's going to be a podcast episode about that. That'd be great. Yeah, that's good. So those are great. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. The question was, how do you fight in a way that actually brings you closer rather than driving you apart? Let me say this. Some of you are going, hey, we've worked on this and you're good at it already. You've been married for a while and you're good at it. Some of you are really honest, are going, we're like at a C- on this, but it's good enough. You know what I'm saying? It's good enough. And here's how you know, I feel like if you're like average at it, is if at the end of this, you actually don't feel closer, right? You just feel like you're maintaining where you were. You should be able to fight and actually feel closer at the end, not just exactly where you were before. And so we'll talk about that. So how do you fight in a way that brings you closer rather than driving you apart?
Yeah, so we are working on this every single day. We are working on this. Yeah. We were laughing because there are times where we are really, really good at this, and there are times where we are explosive and it's not great. So we were laughing about a story not too long ago. I want to say it was forever ago.
Yeah.
We had people over for a game night, and as they're leaving, Patrick said something to me, and it just really got me.
I never do that. Yeah.
And it turned into an explosive fight, so much so that I said, get out, and I threw the board game at his head.
Yeah,
so
it's great. So
if
we
you're
don't play
doing better than that,
Well,
or not.
We don't play Monopoly anymore. I'll tell you that. That's kind of fun.
We
don't do that.
Not.
That's fun. I won though. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. The kids were not in bed either.
No, they weren't.
Yeah, Henry's face was like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
We're
Mommy's got an arm. No, that's fun.
Mommy's a talented one. I sure am. So I think the best advice we ever got, probably in marriage, and we tell every single couple this, that we are broken people. I'm a broken person. He's a broken person in a broken world, and we are trying to make this marriage whole. All right? And that is amazing thing when we can understand that. I now humanize him in the middle of a fight. I now think, oh, you're just a broken person like me. And it becomes something, the fight, instead of like, who's going to win? Because you know that like when you fight and you feel like you won, you didn't actually win, right? And so instead of feeling like a competition of who's going to win and who says the last word, it's now an unraveling of, it's not about the dishes. Let's unravel that more. It's about, I don't feel appreciated. It's about, you don't see me in this. So that's one thing that we use.
Yeah. All the time, yeah. And then I think the other thing too is, and you know this too, is you're married, you fight very differently and you come from different backgrounds. So I'm single parent home. There were 2 of us in a house. We could always disappear somewhere in the house. Emily comes from one of 5 children with 2 parents, and the grandparents were nearby. So the first few times I went up there, I'd hang out for a few hours and then go get coffee just because I'm an introvert. There's a little bit of that. We just came from very different backgrounds. Yeah. And I think when we started in this, our fights were very, like, we just came at it very different. I'm one that's wired to where if somebody gets more and more emotional with me, I turn into more and more of a very, I'm a jerk. I get less emotional as the other person gets emotional. I'm like Zorro, which is like really not good. And then Emily turns into like 11. Like at one point she started bleeding out of her nose looking at me, which is kind of fun. That's a true story. That was fun in the car.
You guys can pray for me.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Yeah, it was great. And you know, it's funny. And so we realized this too. Like there are trigger points in every person's story, and there are trigger points in every person's marriage. And you find this out quick, and then you know how to leverage it even quicker. And there's a part where if you're trying to win, you know which button to press to win the fight for the other person to leave the conversation, right? You know what it is. We know exactly what those are. And at this point, over time, it's like the person who goes for the trigger first ends up losing, and then we just end up starting laughing because it's not even real anymore. I mean, it's just, you know what those triggers are. But those triggers can really blow up. So we would say this, we choose not to use them. I don't use them because I don't want to lose. But outside of that, I think there's a piece this week where we're not going to talk about those specific triggers for us. Emily mentioned this too I think we work to unravel this. This is hard for me. I don't know, especially guys probably struggle with this more. I don't have a lot of emotional words that I use. I will say I'm tired, and that will mean just about any negative emotion that I have. You know what I mean? I'm tired. Are you tired? Nope. I've had 3 cups of coffee. I'm ready to run through a wall. I feel pretty good, but I'm tired, right? That can mean I'm sad. That can mean I'm hurt, which I don't say a lot. Anything like that. I would say one of the best things that I tell guys to do, and it's uber practical, and we do this in premarital with people a lot. I think most guys need a cheat sheet for the emotional words that they can pull from to have language around what they actually feel. Now that sounds cheesy and like the least masculine thing you can do, so just put it in print it out and put it somewhere where she can't see it. I don't care, but when you come back and you say, I feel hurt, then it leads to a much better outcome than if you come back and you don't have words for it, okay? So I would just say, like, for us, we really work hard on having the right words to use. And the other thing for us, too, is we try to use those words in front of our kids. So we are not just training kids to learn how to fight. We're training kids to learn how to communicate what they feel as well, which I love this about our kids, especially Henry. He is more articulate about how he feels than I am, because she's been intentional about him learning those words, right? So for us, we really work hard to do that. And why don't you talk about the accounts part? Yeah, that's another
so one thing we really try and do now, we haven't always been great at this, is to keep short accounts. So I think it was Monday. We both are now working from home, so we are adjusting to this, always being around each other.
She's adjusting to this. I feel great. It's pretty great. Yeah.
Let's be honest. I can't watch Gilmore Girls in the middle of the day. Right?
I can. No, I'm just kidding. I would never. I would never.
He came downstairs to tell me something, and he said something, and I just I snapped back at him.
Yeah.
And quickly, I had to do the walk of shame up the stairs to his office and open up the door and be like, hey, of course, the enemy is going to want to drive division for this week. I said, can we sit and can we talk about it? And we did. So just keeping those short accounts. Don't make little things become really big things because you're too prideful. Just get in there, get in the game, and make sure you make it right.
And you hear this if you're around church a lot. There's this passage in Ephesians chapter 4. It's fun to look at. It says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. This is one of my favorite passages that we took literally while we were dating and in our first year of marriage. I don't advise that. That wasn't great.
No.
We would literally, if we got in a fight at night and she fell asleep, I'd turn the light on and pull the covers off. Like, I think we should keep talking. And she goes, I really don't. I don't feel like that's the right way to move forward.
You waited like
here.
an hour until I was like really like asleep. And then.
Yeah, it would.
Hi.
Yeah. I have a quick question.
This.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
And I'm wired too to want to solve it. I want to solve the problem, right? I want to solve it and that we don't ever have the problem again. And so we can get emotionally good, but I want to get like systematically good and organizationally good in our home. You know what I mean? Like that's how I'm wired. Some of y'all like pray for Emily. Anyway, so there's a little bit of that. And so for our first year of marriage, we did a lot of that. And for the entirety of our dating, we did a lot of that, which is great. And in a lot of ways, it was good. And then we had kids, and we were also like, we need more sleep in life than we're getting right now. And I think what we realized, and this is something that we really still hold true to, is going, we're going to be emotionally good before we go to bed. Mm-hmm. In fact, when couples are not emotionally good before you go to bed, I actually think that really matters. Like, so we're going to fight to be emotionally good, and then we're going to set aside the problems that we haven't been able to solve yet for another time, right? Now, the great part about our relationship, too, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, is we actually have calendared space to work on things in our marriage, right? We actually have, it's not a meeting, it's one-on-one. I don't know what it is. It's a date. It's a date. It's not a one-on-one. No, but it's for us going like, hey, we're gonna work on the things that bubbled up in those areas, and so that's a big one for us. The other one too is this. I think when you have kids, we talk about this one a lot. Anybody ever heard parents say we'll never fight in front of our kids? Have you guys heard that? Have you guys ever said that? We heard that a lot, and we adopted that for about 11 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then we had kids, and then Henry peed on me one night, and I was already mad. And then we had one of the biggest fights we ever had.
That's cute.
And he was around. Now, again, I don't think he was articulate to everything that's going on. We just go, they're just everywhere. And we have 3 of them. They're always around. I love when parents say that. There's a part of me that goes, have you never been in a minivan on the way back from a trip? Like, have you not gotten a fight about that? And so I think what we learned is kids are around. They're around for the moments that we're deeply human and flawed and broken people too.
Throwing board games.
What did you say, throwing board games? Yeah, it's fun. And so for us, I think what we decided to do, and many of you have heard this before, but we take this very seriously. If our kids hear us fighting or even sense that, we assume they're going to sense it at times if there's tension in our marriage. We actually sit them down and we will involve them in the post sort of reconciliation process. So if my sons hear me say something to Emily that's disrespectful, and that's like the highest value in our home, my sons also hear me apologize to them and ask there for forgiveness, and also know that I talked to Emily about that. The other thing is true with Eleanor too. So this is a big deal for us too. I want it to feel foreign to Eleanor to have a man who is disrespectful to her. Which means when I'm disrespectful or when I mess up or when I mess things up, that she hears what it's like for a man to apologize to her. So apologies fly around our house quite a bit. This is a big deal for us, so we really we involve them in that, and appropriately. Like they don't know everything that we fought about. It's not those kinds of things, but they know that we made things right. Here's what I think, and you speak this too. Mm-hmm. I think as we've done that over the years, if we fight in front of our kids now, there's a little bit more eye rolling about it and a little bit less fear. Does that make sense? Some of you grew up in homes where your parents fought and it scared you, right? In our home, for us, it's more of a oh gosh, Dad's being an idiot, more than it is, oh my gosh, are my parents okay? Because they've seen us be okay and they see us on the other side of this consistently. And I think we work really hard about that. And that one, I'd say one thing I put in my notes last night that I forgot to tell you about, so love you. We'll do this one too. Is one of the things that I think helps us a ton is we pray together as a couple a lot. Now, can I say this? If you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, I know this is going to feel a bit foreign. If you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, this doesn't feel foreign, and most people that we talk to don't do this consistently too, right? This is the easiest thing to disregard when you're tired or you're anxious or you don't have time. We actually pray together a lot, and when we do, it actually makes us more human to the other person. And so can I just say this? I know this is one of those things, a lot of you have been a Christian for a long time. You've been married for a long time. You did this early, you've done this in spurts or whatever that is. Prioritize this one practice above anything else I think we're going to say today, and it's going to shift and shape more of your marriage than you'll ever imagine. So there's that one. All right, so let's two more, but I want to talk about the emotional connection, especially after you have kids. Can we talk about this one for a second? So the question is, how do you have emotional connection after kids? Why don't you speak to this a little bit?
So one of the goals of marriage is to like each other in the end, right?
Yeah.
We have to say that because you have to remind yourself of that sometimes. So I think we kind of look for ways that we can deposit into our future marriage, because our kids, Lord willing, will leave the house someday and come back every weekend and visit me. But they will leave, and we'll look at each other, and I don't want to look at him and be like, oh, hey, haven't seen you in a minute. It's been like 25, I don't know how many kids we have, 25 years. And so
they're in the house for 25, no, I'm just kidding. That's good. Yeah.
Is that right? Fast math is not my thing. But I would say just be aware of like the deposits that you're making into your marriage. If one of our kids was going through a rough season or they were kind of pulling away, we wouldn't pull away from them. We wouldn't lean out in any way. And so we are continually leaning in because we know that we're making those deposits into them. And the same goes for marriage. You know, if you're walking through a hard season, if it's a hard week or a hard day, just continually to lean into each other. And I think that really, pays in dividends for sure.
Yeah. One of the things around that too that I think we've worked hard on is anybody ever heard like you need to have a date every week? Have anybody heard that kind of stuff? You need to have a date every month, and then you realize like, well, if I get a babysitter, that's $80, and then we're gonna go eat, and then that's like, I don't know, it depends where we go, but probably not McDonald's, so that's gonna be like 50 or 60 or 70 or more. And then it's like, do we go see a movie or not? But they stopped making good movies a while back, so I don't know, like, how do we do all that? How do we have a date? And you realize that's not always feasible. And then you have kids sometimes, and you go like, the first few months, we don't want to just hand our baby to anybody, literally anybody. We don't want to hand it to anybody, so we don't do that. And then you're trying to figure that out. This is a month there. And then you have life events with health and those kinds of things. I would say one of the things that we learned early, and Emily has driven this in our marriage so well, is going, what do we need to feel like we have intimacy in our marriage that doesn't just mean we go out and have a date like that. Now, I think you should, and I think you should prioritize it, and you should budget for it. And also, there's a realistic nature to this where you go, you can't always do that, or you won't always do that. And so we do couch dates all the time where we put the kids to bed, and we'll sit on the couch, and we will stay up later than we usually stay up, right? We fall asleep pretty quick. We'll stay up later than we usually stay up to talk and prioritize our marriage. One of the things that we do a lot of, we started doing this when we were engaged, is we call it Monday meetings, what we were talking about earlier, but once a week, we spend time together working through whatever kind of bubbled up, but even more than that, one of the best questions that we ask each other every week is, how can I serve you specifically this week, right? That's the other thing I wish that I convince everybody to do. Pray together, and then ask each other this question every week, and don't miss it. Right, don't miss it. Because here's the thing, and this is for the guys. You ready? Here's the fun one. If you ask this question and write it down and calendar it every week, you get a win. There's not like, well, he didn't. No, I did. You know what I mean? And she knows, and it matters. And if they're acts of service, figure out what the act of service is. The love language. If it's words of affirmation, figure it out. You can schedule text with iPhone. There you go. Figure out how you're going to do it and be intentional about however it is they feel loved from you. And so we work hard on that to do that every week. And it always is morphing and changing slightly, but it's in the calendar where we take time every week to do that. And then the last one.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Oh, please. Yeah.
This is a new thing for us, even the past year, 3 weeks. We would put the kids to bed. We would be tired. We would walk into our bedroom, and it became just a catch-all of laundry and kids crap and random
Literal
stuff.
crap. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, diapers.
We found diapers in places we shouldn't. But
some people that don't have kids are like, really?
Yeah. Just wait. And he went away for a business trip, and worked super, super hard to clean out our bedroom and hang the curtains I've been meaning to hang for 2 years now and make our bed real nice because it didn't feel like a retreat or something that would, really foster intimacy. It felt like another chore of something that I did not get to that day. And so if you're just the emotional connection, gotta throw that in there.
No, that's really good. That's really good. And it worked.
It
was a great week.
So fun.
Right. Much shorter sermon that Sunday. Anyway, there's that one.
Okay. Take a drink of water.
That's not too bad. I said PG-13. I don't know. That's fine. Yeah, that's good. All right. One other thing on this, and I think this is a weird one to say out loud. I heard this early and I didn't agree with it, and then I started to apply it and I agreed. Right? I heard a leader say this early. He said, "You need to lower the expectations that you have on your spouse so that you create margin for gratitude in the small things." And I didn't like that. I don't like lowering expectations for anything. So you can lower your expectations without lowering your standards. He said, but when you lower your expectations, right, what it's going to do is create margin for you to see the things that you didn't see along the way. So we joke about Chick-fil-A all the time, but we'll go to Chick-fil-A and I'll be driving, and those little ketchup packet things, and this is so stupid, and they'll open that and hand it to me. That sounds so dumb, and I'm like, that's the best thing in the whole freaking world. Like, get somebody like that, and then you go like, she's like, of all the things I do. Yeah,
that's great.
That's
recognized?
Yeah. Nice. But I laugh like going, when you figure out how to lower your expectations, and it's not that they go away, but when you lower expectations, you're able to see with so much more clarity all of the other things that your spouse does and the person that you're dating does, and in marriage. You can catch this in people that are engaged and dating too. If there's an expectation that continually goes unmet and you're just always frustrated about it, it's a little bit like your job. It's like, well, that was your job to do that. Anytime that comes out, an emotion that you feel, it just zaps the intimacy. So we work hard on that. All right, the last one we're going to talk about, and then we're going to wrap up in a second, is we got so many questions around this, and I think this is a fascinating one, and we'll talk pretty bluntly about this one too. But it was questions around what are your boundaries in marriage? How do you protect your marriage? How do you protect intimacy in your marriage? How do you do those kinds of things? And one of the questions was around like how do you rebuild trust in marriage when even like small parts of it are lost? And so I want to talk about this for a second because I think it's so important. It's one of the most important things I think we'll hit. And that's this. I put in my notes, and it's not perfectly worded, but I'd say you will either act like you're rebuilding trust or because it's been broken, or you'll act like you're building trust before you break it. Either way, you're going to end up doing the same thing. So just choose to do the things at the beginning of it, right? And so for us, we talk a lot about boundaries. We started talking about boundaries from the very first part of our relationship when we were dating. Obviously, they've morphed over time, but this is a big one for us. Now, I will also say this. Can I say this? Because I'm a pastor, everybody assumes boundaries that all pastors should have. And so there's a little bit of you going, yeah, but you're a pastor and you don't want to be that guy, And that is very true. That is. And also, if I wasn't a pastor, these are the boundaries that I would hold pretty deeply. And so for us, I would say this. We work hard to keep our relationship. One of the most practical things that we see and we talk to people about, and you pick up on this quick, is when you're around people who down their spouse in public, it is diminishing intimacy in private. It just always is. Right? And so we just said early on, we're not going to talk bad about each other to other people or in public. Now, there's a flip side of this. Like, there's a sarcasm piece of this where you go like, well, if I'm sarcastic and I'm being funny, can we do some of that? I would just say like one of the things that we really work hard on is even in the sarcastic sort of side of it, that is very minimal. We try really hard not to do that too, right? And here's why this matters is when you are fostering that kind of trust outside of like your private space in your home, and the assumption is that anybody that hears us talk about each other is going to hear about the best version of the other spouse. Let me just tell you, it changes the game in trust and intimacy out the gate. That's right. So we'll say with premarital couples sometimes, you'll hear this. We've had so many. So I know I had people raise their hand, but we've had so many of these. And you'll get a sense of like, do they speak well of each other together? Do they speak well of each other when they're apart and with other people? And I think this is one of the things in marriage that you have to work so hard at is we want it to be so foreign, right? If somebody come to me like, Emily was bashing you the other day and saying this, that would be the most foreign thing for me because she doesn't do that, right? That would be weird, right? So we don't do that in our marriage. That's a big deal for us. The other one is around opposite sex relationships. I would say this, not everybody agrees with me. I feel like I sound like Andy Griffith sometime, like a little bit of the 50s, and I totally get it. We just don't have friends of the opposite sex that are like actual real friends. Like this is not, like, it's not like I don't know people that have the opposite sex, but I'm not opening up to other people of the opposite sex. And here's why this matters so much, is all of that starts very small and then it just grows into bigger things. Then everybody's going, well, you're a pastor and above approach. And I'm like, that is true. And also, I want to flood all of that in one direction. And if it's not working, or if I don't feel like I can, then I want us to work on why it's not working and why I can't do that, right? I don't have a best friend that's a female. I don't do that. The other one is this, and we laugh about this now. A lot of you come over to our house. It's kind of fun, so we'll have team nights and all these kind of things. And I'll walk people out. I'll walk people to the car. And somebody joked about it recently because I don't think they realized it, and then they picked up on it. Like, I don't walk people out to the car by myself. I drag one of my kids or another person out with me. Now you're like, man, you take that to a high level. Like we had a tornado watch a while back, and there was somebody that came to the La Scala building that was working on kids stuff, and I didn't know that she was there. And if you're ever around me, and you'll probably feel real awkward because I'm good at making it that way. But I was like, oh, this feels weird. There's nowhere for us to go because it really was like tornado-y stuff. Like it was a terrible storm. I said, oh, this is kind of weird. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to call your husband. And I'd love for him just to be on the phone and just make sure that he knows that we're here. And I'm going to be on the other side of the building. I was on the other side of the building. I called her. And you're like, man, that's a high extreme. Are you like worried about it? I was like, I am worried about it. And not because I feel like I'm going to do something, because I want that line to be so far away and feel so foreign that there's not a like, oh, and then we got close, right? That it feels weird. The other thing we talk about a lot is we have access to every account. There's no email. I changed a password on a prayer note that I had recently, and I forgot that I did, and so I told her that. But outside of that, like, she can see any and everything that we talk about, and it's there. And you go, and that's not because we have this like, we don't trust each other. That's actually because we trust each other so much, we want to just be radically transparent. There's just not a space in my life that Emily doesn't get access to. Now, I will say this. Some of you are like, yeah, that doesn't work for us because, and you might be right until you're not, right? And so this is what I would just say. I think one of the best things that you could do is really work so hard to foster really healthy boundaries that draw you into each other. So I know you're going to talk about this for a second, the guard your heart part, but did you want to hit that too?
Yeah, so there's why this is so important is because guarding your heart is such a big deal. There's over 30 verses in the Bible that point to guarding your heart. Above all else, guard your heart. Above all else, guard your heart. Because where your heart leads, you will eventually follow. And that's hard to hear, but it's also very, very true. What God's put together, and if you're trying to have God in the center of your relationship, it is a big deal that you recognize that the enemy, of course, would want to cause division. Of course, he would want to sneak in any little kind of way, like a little emotion here, a little emotion there, and eventually the rest of you, it could follow and to, or just really lead to destruction. I remember my brother gave us, he was 20 years old when we were getting married, and he wrote on at the bridal shower, it's like your best advice. And he wrote, keep your stick on the ice, which I was like, what in the world does that
What did he say?
Keep your stick on the ice, which I thought it was like a perverted thing. And I was like, oh my God.
I did too when you said that. Yeah. I was like, yeah,
and,
that's right.
Maybe it is, and I'll Google this later and be like, oh,
somebody's out there going like,
yeah.
All right. I don't know. That's very great.
But I did find it like years later, and it's a hockey term, and because I did Google it, and it's all about being vigilant, knowing what's coming towards you, right, in hockey, and knowing where your teammates are, and then just being always ready for what's next. And I was like, oh, dang, for a 20-year-old who wasn't married, that was really good advice. And it really was, because we have to stay in the game. We have to know what's coming towards us. We have to be ready and armored and connected to each other, most importantly.
That's really good. That's really good. And we work hard on that. I think for us, we would say, if you're a follower of Jesus in the room, and I don't want to put like, we're really not a place that does guilt. We're not trying to do that. Yeah. But I'd say this. There is a responsibility that you have if you are a follower of Jesus to keep your marriage as a place of a model for people who are not followers of Jesus. Your marriage, I really believe, it's not that it's going to be perfect, but it should be the envy of other people because you work so hard to make it that way. And I'll just tell you this, it's not that you're going to be perfect because you're not, and it's not because it's going to be perfect because it's absolutely not. But I would say this, what you're going to work really hard on as a follower of Jesus, and Paul talks about this in the New Testament, Jesus talks about this several times, is that your life in a lot of ways is on display for the world, and your marriage is one of the things that your kids are looking at, that your friends are looking at, that your coworkers are looking at, and you get to protect that. You get to work so hard to make that great. So here's what we're going to do. I'll tell you this. I know there was about 74 other questions that you guys asked that we just didn't have time to answer. But I want to do this. What we are going to do is we're going to talk about these things more. If you're interested in that, we'll tell you how you can listen to that and look at it. We love this. But here's what I love to do to wrap up our time. I wanted to give you just a second to reflect on this. And so I'm going to ask Josh to come up just for a second to play. If you're here and you're single, some of the things that we talked about, some of you are here and you're single and you're not interested in being married. That's not really not on your radar, and totally understand that. This is the marriage kind of series, so some of this might not have been for you, and that's totally okay. But if you're here and you're single and you're like, I hope to be married one day, and you're not sure what it all looks like, but that's kind of your thing, we're going to ask you to reflect on some of the things that we've talked about today. One of the things specifically we're going to ask you to reflect on is, are there areas of your life where you don't feel like you have a clear vision for your life? And we're going to give you a second just to process that. But for those of you who are married in the room, here's what I'm going to ask you to do just for a couple of minutes is we know this. When you leave here, we're going to pack up trailers, and then we're going to go to the same restaurant that we go to every single Sunday. And then after that, we will be into whatever's next for the week. And I know that, and you're probably like that too. And so sometimes it's just easy just to pause and go, was there anything that stood out to you? And so what we're going to do just for a second is actually something that's called listening prayer. And we said a lot. I know we talked for a while, but I'm going to ask you if you would, single, married, everybody in the room just for a second. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes just for a second, bow your heads. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. This is a very simple prayer. And since we talked so much about practical things today, what I'm going to ask you to do is to pray a very simple prayer. And the prayer is this. The prayer is like, God, if there's anything that you want me to take away from today and act on now, pray that you would help me to know what that is. And I pray that he would illuminate that to you. So just for a second, I'm going to ask you to pray that prayer. God, what do you want me to take away? What is the action step that you want me to do? It's probably not 10. It's probably 1 or 2. What's that action step? I'm going to ask you to do that. And then with that thing in mind, we're going to give you just a second to process that. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you if you would to pull out your phone just for a second. To pull out your phone, if you would. And I'm going to ask you to take a very practical step in this. You had a thing that came to your mind. If you did, I'm going to ask you to pull out your phone, and I'm going to ask you to, if you have a calendar, do it this way. If you have an email app and that's easier for you, do it that way. If you have a to-do list thing, that's great. If you're an Apple Notes person like I am, put it in Apple Notes. I want you to write down what that thing is for you. And it might not be for everybody, but for the ones that it is, write down what that thing is. What's that practical step for you this week? Some of you need to calendar it out to remember to think about it and to make a change. Some of you need to email yourself so that you see it on Monday and know that that's how you're going to start your week. Some of you need to put in your to-do list and know that it's in your to-do list or in your Apple whatever so that it pops up later. Just put it somewhere where you're going to see it after lunch, after all of this today. And the last thing I'm going to ask you to do, and then we're going to pray for it, is this. I'm going to ask you to do whatever that 1 or 2 things, whatever that is. I'm going to ask you to actually take whatever that step is this week. Not next week, not a month from now, but take that step this week. Let me pray for us, and then we'll wrap up our time. Father, we thank you so much for today. God, thank you so much for the people in the room who are single and processing through marriage or themselves or working through the vision for their lives or where you're leading them. God, we just pray that you would speak so clearly to them in this. I pray for people that are married and some people that are here and they're married and it's so great and we just ask that it would just get even better. The people here where it feels a little bit average or mundane, God, I pray that they would take whatever steps that they need to take, Father, to make sure that it's great. And usually those are in small practical things that they're working on. God, we ask that you would help them to do that. And then we just pray for the people in the room who are struggling when it comes to marriage. And there are pieces of this that might have been helpful, but a lot of it even feels distant for them because of how broken it feels and seems. God, I ask that you would heal the broken parts. And God, we ask that you would move both through their practical steps, but also in supernatural ways to bring them closer to their person. God, we love you. We thank you for this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.